plenty of winter weather to talk about. Welcome to the Thursday, February 13th, 2025 edition of Weather to Watch. Here's what I'm watching. Still plenty of action left in the lower 48, that's for sure. Atmospheric river plowing into the west. Huge storm there off California. A severe storm and tornado potential is going to resurface. We had some tornadoes yesterday, and on Saturday, the potential in that basic same area is there once again. Another Arctic surge, actually several of them, cold air not in short supply, and because of that, any storm that fires up, we have to consider snow and maybe also freezing precipitation to go along with that. Visible satellite loop from earlier today, and it shows snow, and you can always tell snow, it doesn't move. So there's that latest storm right there, and you can't see it in the northeast because cloud cover is preventing you from seeing that. But when the sun comes out, you can certainly see where snow's been laid down. Huge storm off the west coast, actually now coming ashore on the west coast. I'll show you a separate satellite loop for that. Switch to the 500 millibar flow on top of that. Big trough of low pressure feeding the upward motion and the low pressure centers of the surface out ahead of that. High pressure comes in behind troughs like that. That's what we're seeing. And I'll review the surface here in a minute. And then we have that little bit of ridge of high pressure building in across the west, but quickly replaced by that large storm system you're seeing in California and portions of Oregon too. Here is the surface map for the lower 48, and it features cyclones on the coast, basically. So we have this departing low or cyclone in the northeast. We'll zoom in on that in a second. And then we have a big system coming ashore, and we'll show you a satellite loop of how impressive that looked this afternoon. They're right along the California-Oregon border, and of course in the middle of the U.S., a big old Arctic high just sitting there, parked right over the heartland, right over Missouri. So the first thing we'll do here is go up to the northeast and show you what things are looking like up there. And if we do that, that is a low pressure area with snow. Of course, that's the same snow that flew through southern Wisconsin. We'll take a look at some of those totals here in a minute. It is still snowing in upstate New York and through certain locations there in southeast Canada. But it is a storm that's definitely beginning to wind down a little bit. Meanwhile, if we go down a little bit, the fronts, and you can just about consider this to be one front now, slicing through Georgia into the panhandle of Florida. There's the Arctic high sitting over Missouri with high temperatures well below freezing. This map was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're looking at temperatures. Kansas City's only 21 degrees. Chicago at O'Hare is only 17 degrees. But, as weather systems move along, of course, once this high moves, the southerly flow will begin to take over, at least for a little bit, and that's what that warm front right there is all about from in southern South Dakota, Nebraska. Winds have already come back around and are now coming out of the south across the high plains. Even with that, though, you have to go all the way to southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma to find temperatures above freezing. So this is a very cold air mass for sure. If we zoom out a little bit, then we have this big storm coming ashore in California. A large occluded low pressure system. That means the low and the pressures are stacked above each other in the atmosphere. Usually a pretty slow moving system when that happens. Lots of rain to talk about and snow with that particular weather system. We're going to switch gears and look at the western satellite, goes west, and this is the same visible satellite loop from earlier today. And boy, this storm is just really apparent. And what's cool in the atmosphere is you have that larger circulation, then you have these smaller little vortices, and we really started to appreciate what those look like over the last couple of decades because we have these high resolution satellite images now. Pretty impressive. Another storm with its moisture surge over the central Pacific, but that storm again is normal in California and in that part of the world to get their mountain snows and winter rains to make up for the fact that it really doesn't do that much out there in the summer. So that's why they store water, and that's why they rely on that mountain snow to melt and bring it to areas of California that need it later on in the season when the rain stops. Take a look at this. This is another thing that's kind of interesting. This is how the weather models look at low pressure centers. So you have this one that actually kind of tracks across the central plains, eventually curves up this way. This one's already almost out of the picture. And then what's typical with these lows is the surface low is usually right underneath the upper level low. There's not a lot of development or what we call cyclogenesis here. But this is always, I think, kind of interesting to look at. And we've got more of these coming up next week. Actually, one of them is a trough of low pressure with the low uncharacteristically far south for this time of year. But nevertheless, that's the pattern we've been dealt with. And while we're talking about snow here, I want to show you, this is the Euro model. We'll have a review of what the Euro model is looking like for the next, let's say, 7 days later on. But I wanted to show you this. It's pretty impressive. This is additional snow. This isn't snow on top of snow that's already on the ground. This is what this particular model is forecasting in addition to what's already happened through Wednesday. You can see mountain snows very, very prevalent with that offshore system just pumping moisture there. And then we have another one of these little systems that comes in like this. That's for Tuesday. There are 1 foot snow totals in parts of Kansas with that one. And look at some of this, 2 foot totals. Maybe an exaggeration for that one, but the Northeast continues to get hit with storms, lake effect snow. There's no shortage of snow in New England and much of the northeastern U.S. Well, they had some tornadoes yesterday in southern Mississippi, parts of Louisiana, and now the stage is set on Saturday for another severe weather outbreak, with this being the middle threat. So if you look right here, that 3 out of 5. So that's a pretty significant forecast for the Storm Prediction Center to make this many days out. This is valid Saturday, as I said. And then there's other things we can look at too, like the when you compare this weather pattern to what's happened in the past with similar weather patterns. That's what SIPS does. And so you're seeing almost identical bullseye here. That's all forms of severe weather. If you're wondering what that is, severe weather is classified as hail, damaging winds, above 59 miles per hour, and tornadoes. So that's all threats right there. But if I show you the tornado threat, it almost exactly mirrors that. That tells me that in that severe weather threat, there's a pretty good chance, at least a 1/3 chance of the 3, that the significant threat is going to be tornadoes. So that's very interesting, but not unusual. This is, you can get this off the SPC website. It's fascinating to watch this, especially if you loop it, let it loop. But this is basically for the 12th of February, yesterday, but pretty accurate. This is just the probabilities, and we're looking at climatology 82 through 11. And you can see right here in the deep south is where it's not unusual for severe storms to be there, basically. Why is that? Well, the jet stream is still howling this time of year, usually out of that direction, and there's still abundant moisture that is readily drawn up into this area from the Gulf. So those two combine to produce some pretty nasty severe storm outbreaks sometimes in February. And sometimes they're nocturnal too, because you're not relying on daytime heating. You have plenty of energy throughout the hours. Jet stream is howling throughout all the night, so it could be pretty significant. And if we break this down according to tornadoes, notice there's a bullseye right there in south central Mississippi. And this is just climatology, what has happened with similar upper air and surface patterns in the past. Well, in terms of wind and cold, Friday through Tuesday, a significant portion of the northern plains with extreme cold. You know, winter is supposed to be cold, but this is getting kind of ridiculous cold. And a lot of wind. We've already seen a lot of wind, especially through Wyoming, but Colorado, even northern New Mexico. Whenever you have a strong jet stream, as strong as it is blowing over the Rockies, you are going to translate that energy down to the surface. So very windy conditions expected in the period, generally speaking, Friday through Tuesday, and cold in the northern plains. I'll show you Fargo's forecast in a minute. I hate to pick on Fargo, or maybe I do like to pick on Fargo, but it always comes through with cold temperature forecast. Let's take a look at this. This is the numbers at the cities represent the high temperatures, and the colors are the departures from normal. So much of the country, except for the upslope areas here of the Rockies and Florida, are going to be experiencing below normal temperatures on Saturday. You can see the Arctic air is trying to build in again across Montana and North Dakota. If we move to Monday, a big chunk of the U.S. cold, still some warmth ahead of that next storm. I'll show you the Euro's idea what's happening in the future, and you'll see why there's warmth out ahead of that system. But if we switch to Wednesday, it looks like green and blue is below normal. So I'd say about 3/4 of the country is going to be below normal on Wednesday, and these are high temperatures, with much of the country here much below normal. Here's Fargo. This is a forecast of temperature and precipitation, and this is a long stretch. Look at some of the high temperatures. 3 days in a row, the highs will be below zero. The highs, with low temperatures down in the minus 24-degree range here early next week. And it stays below freezing until not Monday of next week, Monday of the following week. Well, let's look at the surface precipitation type isobars here. This is the European model. I will say the GFS model, which is the other primary long-term model that I look at, comparing those two a lot, they're actually in pretty good agreement. So sometimes I'll show you a blend. Sometimes I'll show you the ensemble for the Euro. Sometimes it just depends on what the weather pattern looks like. But in this case, we'll just stick with one here. This is the European long-range model here, and this is initialized today. It shows that area of high pressure that I showed you on the surface map, drifting a little bit into southern Illinois. So now we'll go, and there are actually two weather systems of interest. The first one is going to develop kind of subtly. Remember the low track I showed you earlier? That's that one. See, it's tucked away there in southwest portions of Kansas, right there. And then eventually it kind of goes a little bit further south. These systems hook when they develop. They often form on the front range of the Rockies, and then the upper level flow digs them south, and they form like a fish hook, and then it comes back up toward the northeast. Very common. It's one of the things I think they still teach in meteorology. Anyway, and then this thing moves on up the Ohio Valley, basically. So this is the weather map. Almost Sunday. Let's move that up one more. So that's Sunday. There we go. About 6 a.m. So we have this big weather maker right here. Is very obvious, producing backlash of snow and rain in the area. More heavy rains in areas that have already received that through the Tennessee River Valley, and so that is a big weather maker. There are no advisories out on that one yet because that's late on Saturday and Sunday. But keep an eye on that storm. And there's also a layer of ice in that too. And then if we go forward, we have more Arctic air spilling into the Great Plains. Then we have another one of these little weather systems. That's this right here. The only difference is this one is going to take a slightly different track as the upper level patterns shift a little bit. So now if we watch what happens to this one, it actually travels into Texas, and it actually kind of loses its definition as a low and becomes one large trough of low pressure, elongated. So this right here is another concern. This is the trough of low pressure at the surface right here. So that's a snow and ice maker. Again, the snow track is fairly far south with what is considered, I guess, normal for winter time. So anyway, that's another storm to watch. And again, I'll repeat it. I live right there. I'm going to put a number 1 right there. That's where I live. So I'm watching that system with great interest. And a lot of the people who watch these are probably in the Ozarks. So again, you're on notice. I don't know if I'll do a heads up video on that quite yet. Maybe tomorrow. But certainly be on the lookout. And by the way, that is 0Z on Wednesday, so that is 6 p.m. Tuesday evening is when that snow is depicted over southern Missouri. Well, lots to talk about, certainly, so you'll want to tune into the next weather to watch in a couple of days. Thanks for watching. If you think of it, like the video, and certainly I would invite you to subscribe to this channel. Have a good night.